Well, welcome everyone. Today is Sabbath, February 5th, 2022. And I'd like to welcome you to today's Bible study. And today I decided to pick a topic that I think is rather interesting, and that will give us some food for thought. And it is the 7 I am statements of Yahshua in John, in the book, in the Gospel of John. The 7 I am statements. You wonder, well, what is that? Well, there are 7 spots where Yahshua makes particular declarations using the term I am. And I'll explain the significance of that as we go a little bit deeper into the study. But they are rather significant because every one of those declarations describes a characteristic of Yahshua the Messiah, and therefore a characteristic of his father Yahweh as well. And I think when we study that, you're going to see different aspects of Yahshua's character. And remember that we're supposed to be, to the extent that it pertains to us, we're supposed to be emulating or imitating Yahshua's character. So in learning about his character, we're also learning to an extent about our character, right? And I say to the extent that we can, because as you'll see, one of the things that is described as Yahshua's character as the good shepherd. But we're not shepherds over everyone, right? But we perhaps might be a shepherd over some, an under shepherd of sorts. So even that speaks to us in terms of the kind of character that we should have. So we'll go through them and it'll become more evident as we do so. So I hope that you will enjoy the study. I know that I enjoyed preparing for it. I learned a lot as I was pulling my notes together. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is, I don't usually do this, but because I'm on the road today and I don't have paper in front of me, I'm going to just share my notes on screen so that I can see them and teach from them. And then you can see my notes in progress. So why don't we first start by going to the text. So I'm going to take you to Exodus 3, because I think that that's the most appropriate place to start. So you should have that on screen in just a moment, and I will begin. And let me know if that's coming across the screen, please. Thank you. Okay, so if we go to Exodus 3, and of course, the context of Exodus 3 is what? The context is Moses at the burning bush, and Yahweh is giving Moses a commission at that point to go to the children of Israel in Egypt, who are captive in Egypt, and to begin to deliver them out of the hand of Pharaoh. So in verse 13 of Exodus 3, this is what it says, and I'm using an NASB version, New American Standard Bible Version, which is very true to the Hebrew. He says, then Moses said to Elohim, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the Elohim of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Elohim said to Moses, I am who I am. Or you could say, I am that I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Elohim furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, Yahweh, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations. So this is the primary, if you will, fundamental scripture that proclaims the name of Yahweh. It is the foundational text, is probably the better word I'm looking for, with regard to Yahweh's name and how it's presented to the children of Israel. And in verse 15 is where he actually identifies his name, right? The Tetragrammaton. If you look in the lower left there, you'll see it there in the notes, Yahweh. But it's interesting because before he even gives him the name, he explains the meaning of the name. And he says to him, Elohim said to Moses, I am who I am. Well, if you look down at the term am on the bottom left in the notes, the term is Hayah. And the term Hayah is, in fact, the verb of existence. It's it's the verb to be, but it's not just anything's being. This is unique to the name of Yahweh, Hayah. So if you go to the Hebrew text here, it will say Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which means I am that I am, but it could alternately mean I was what I was, or I will be what I will be, because it's all encompassed in that verb Hayah. So, and I'm not intending this to be a full-blown study on the name, but the name of Yahweh is vital because it's the very name of existence. It's the name of being, if you will. And he's the one that not only is and always has been, but he's the one that causes everything else to be. So for him to explain to them, what is his name? Moses asked, and what shall I say to them? Elohim said, he first gives them an explanation of what his name is, because he wants them to understand that he is eternal and that he is the Elohim that causes everything, including them, to be. I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And it's interesting because it's not a name like any other name, right? It's not a name where you're identifying a particular thing or a particular character or some sort of thing, or an animal or whatever it may be. It's something that causes all things to exist, right? And then he goes on to give him in a particular form of Hebrew, he gives him the name itself that derives from that verb of existence, which is the name Yahweh. So the reason I take a lot of time to start with that is because when I talk about the I am statements, this is what I'm speaking of, the I am statements. And you'll see that as we go into the book of John. And by the way, the book of John, and we're going to come back to this account at the burning bush, because this is conveyed in the book of John as well. Because remember that there's nothing new under the sun. And whenever you look particularly at the scriptures, you're looking at restatements, if you will, or re-reveals of things that have already been seen before, because they're meant to elicit, when you see them later in the text, they're meant to elicit things that you had seen before. So right as you begin the book of John, what's it talking about? It's talking about in the beginning was the word, right? And as soon as you see in the beginning was the word, what are you supposed to think of? If you're a person that's familiar with the Hebrew scriptures, the immediate thing that you're going to think of is the beginning in Genesis, because that's where it all starts. And the language is similar. So when you think in the beginning was the word, well, okay, in the beginning, immediately that gives, okay, in the beginning, Genesis Bereshit. And you see that throughout many, many of the texts, and particularly in the book of John. The book of John is, as I've described before, it's unique among the Gospels because it is, unlike the other three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it is distinct in the way in which it presents information and in the themes that it covers. And there's a reason for that. Each gospel account has a particular aspect of the Messiah that they're trying to convey. And as we all know from the scriptures in the book of Deuteronomy, it tells you that you establish every matter with the use of 2 witnesses. And here we have 4 witnesses, right? But when you look at it, it's interesting. You could also think, okay, well, the first 3 gospels can provide one type of witness. And then the Gospel of John, which is unique from the other 3, it provides a second type of witness. And, I've described also how the book of Matthew and the book of Luke, or the Gospel of Matthew and Gospel of Luke, more than likely have as their source material the Gospel of Mark. And that's what most scholars think, that they started with Mark and then they added their own elements and their own points of view and the particular things that they were trying to emphasize. But they all are operating they're all pretty much seeing together, which is what the term synoptic means. So those 3 gospels are referred to as the synoptic gospels because they're seeing together. But the book of John is unique. It's altogether different. One of these, months or years, I think I probably should, Yahweh willing, I should give a full study on the book of John, because I think it's rather interesting. We typically cover a lot of material in the synoptics, but we don't usually do a whole lot with the book of John. So consider this study today as a bit of a taste of the book of John, because it is rather unique. Let me share with you for a couple of minutes here. Let me do this first. Let me share with you the Bible Project summary of the book of John. just to give you a sense of the breadth and scope of John. So I'll just kind of look at some of these headlines here, right? So you have this introduction here where he uses, and I know it's a little bit hard to see because it's kind of small, but he uses various terms that would be familiar to a Jewish person reading this, particularly in the first century and in the early years. So, things like, Messiah, right? And, Lamb, Nazareth. These were all terms that they'll be familiar with. Then when you get over to chapters 2 through 10, there are 21 chapters in the book of John, 2 through 10, miraculous signs and controversies. And I'm just going to use the headers that he has here to give you an idea of the scope of this. All these Jewish institutions, right? There are 4 Jewish institutions. So you're describing, a wedding, temple, a rabbi, sacred well, and there's so much packed into all this. So if we ever get a chance to go through this verse by verse, this will be an amazing study because it's going to be a lot of material. Then, so he starts out with 4 Jewish institutions, and then he has chapters 5 to 10, 4 Jewish feasts. So Sabbath, Passover, Tabernacles, and Hanukkah. That's a good way to break this up. I agree with that. That's really good. And then 11 through 12 talks about the raising of Lazarus. And there's structure and there's order in all of this that I don't have the time to go into, right? But there's a culmination of everything here where Lazarus is raised, and it follows on the heels of all these things that are being spoken of, whether it's Jewish institutions and Jewish feasts, right? And then when you get to chapter 13, then we start going into Yahshua's final words to his disciples in chapters 13 through 17. You know chapter 13 very well, most of you here, because you've participated in several Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread with me. And we've read chapter 13 many a time when we open up the feast season as we wash one another's feet. And that's what's described here in chapter 13, the foot washing. But there's also these other speeches, right? Yahshua's speech and prayer, and these are all considered his final words. And then 18 through 20 talks about Yahshua's death and resurrection. And then 21 is sort of an epilogue that describes where we go from here. So it's, as you can see, there's a lot of ground covered in the book of John. And when you look through this, if you look carefully through it, and if you compare it to the synoptic gospels, you'll see that it's quite different in character. You don't have, the emphasis on the parables that you find elsewhere. You don't have, a lot of the descriptions and the stories and things that are described in the synoptics. You don't see them here. You see other things because he's trying to emphasize different things, and it has a quality and a taste all of its own. Okay, so we'll come back to this in a little bit, but let's talk about where we're going to go. We're going to talk about, and let me bring this up on screen so you can see it. Let's see here. Share screen. And you should see my notes coming up in just a moment here, okay? And this is where we started, right? Exodus 3, 14 to 15. That's where you see Yahweh's memorial name described. In Exodus 6:3, we have an interesting verse as well, right? And let's just take a look at that. We're going to alternate between my notes and scripture and other things. So let's look at Exodus 6:3. So in Exodus 6:3, Yahweh reveals something interesting to Moses. Let's start with 6:2 for context. Elohim spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am Yahweh. So he restates his name. And I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as Elohim Almighty. That term is El Shaddai. But by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. Okay. So this is in the NASB. I did not make myself known to them. And, I'm not going to take the time to go through different translations, but this is the usual sort of translation that people give. I did not make myself known to them. And it confuses people because if you go into the book of Genesis, you see that they knew him as Yahweh. So what is this all about? What do you mean I didn't make myself known to them by my name Yahweh? They knew my name Yahweh. They called upon the name of Yahweh. So, scholars have looked at this, at the language here, and what they believe that this may actually be saying is that is more something along the lines of, but by my name I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name Yahweh did I not make myself known to them. Right. In other words, they knew me as El Shaddai, but it was more important that they knew me as Yahweh. Did I not make myself known to them as Yahweh? And that to me seems to be a better translation, because he did in fact reveal himself to them. That's not terribly important for the discussion that we're going to have today, but I know that sometimes people see that they get confused by that. So I just wanted to point out that it is highly likely that they did know his name, because we see them using it all the time in Genesis. So this revelation of his name is very important. And the reason why I even bring this up is because he made himself known to them. Because another interpretation sometimes people have about this is that they knew my name, but they didn't know the fullness of the character of that I was describing in my name. They knew me as El Shaddai, but by name Yahweh, I didn't. Any of those interpretations is possible depending on how you look at the Hebrew here. It could be they knew my name Yahweh, but they did not fully understand who I was. They didn't understand my full character. And now, as you go and do this, Moses, they're going to understand my full character. And that's important because Yahshua does the same thing in the Old Testament. So it's good to know the background of the terminology with I am, because you're going to see it repeated in different shades and different tones in the New Testament as well. Did I not say what I say Old Testament? Sorry. So let's I'm probably gonna do that a few times. I'm in a bit of a fog today, so I had a bit of a rough week, so I'm just catching up today, which is great. Actually, well, anyway, I'm good. I'm good. The last couple of days have been better, but I did a couple of late nights this week, so I'm like, I guess I'm not as young as I think I am anymore, but I'm good. So, but by my name Yahweh, I was not known to them, but by my name, I'm pointing to this. I don't think I changed it for you. Sorry, give me a second here. Okay, hopefully that's on screen there for you. Exodus 6:3, but by my name Yahweh, I was not known to them, but by my name Yahweh, was I not known to them, or I was known to them, but they didn't understand fully my character. So with that little bit of introduction and background, let's start considering these 7 I am statements of Yahshua that describe his character and ultimately that of his Father. So if we go back to the diagram of the book of John, I'm going to increase this just a little bit so you could see it better. Okay, and I'm going to bring it over to here. So if you look up here, and by the way, the Bible Project are not the only ones who have brought these out. This is many commentators. Matter of fact, many of my notes here are adapted from a study on Crosswalk that brought these out in a very nice way. So the 7 I am statements, you can see them here. These are different verses in John where they appear, right? So I'm going to give you the 7 statements and then I'm going to unpack them for you, okay? So he says at these various locations, he says, I am the bread of life. He says, I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine. And it's interesting because we've seen these verses over and over again in the course of our walk with him. But after today, you might see them in a slightly different light because you'll be looking for them a little bit more carefully. I want you to also notice this term here, okay, which if you don't read Greek, it says ego eimi. And I've brought this out to you before, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more in just a few minutes. But you have here these additional statements that he made. They're of a different character than here, right? They're not declarative statements in the same way that they are here, but he uses the term I am in these verses as well. And there are 7 additional verses to the 7 declarative statements where he uses this terminology. So and by the way, you don't see this in any of the in any of the synoptic gospels. It's unique to the book of John. So when we go through this, you start to think, okay, what is it that I'm seeing here? Well, he's declaring, let me just say it, and then we'll go back and we'll look at very specifically. He's revealing his identity in a very powerful way to the Jewish people, right? He's revealing, I am the Messiah that you've been waiting for. But more than that, it's not just the Messiah. He's revealing, I am Yahweh, is what he's saying, essentially, right? Not the Father per se, but he, as the representative, as the Son, he has the same character, and he is of the same mind, and he is, for all intents and purposes, for the people in front of him, he is Yahweh to them. And, I don't have time to go through all the different verses to talk about his preexistence, but that is something that is brought out time and again in the scriptures. We talked a little bit about it when we talked about the angel of Yahweh a few weeks ago, if you recall. But he's telling them, he's making statements to people who are very well versed in scripture. So to a modern audience today, and frankly, to a modern audience of Gentiles who don't understand the Hebrew scriptures, it may not make all that much sense, or it just kind of, it makes sense on a certain level, on a superficial level. But to someone who's familiar and thoroughly educated and brought up in the Hebrew scriptures, it would mean something significantly different. And this book is meant to appeal to that particular audience mostly, where he's describing himself as the one that they've been waiting for, right? Sometimes people will say, and I mentioned this a few studies ago as well, that Yahshua never considered himself to be, the Messiah. I couldn't disagree more. He didn't come flat out and say, I'm the Messiah. But when he was asked who he was, he gave responses that indicated without a shadow of a doubt, not only that he thought he was the Messiah, but that he referred to himself as the Son of Man. That's Daniel language, right? He referred to himself as the great I am through these declarative statements, and everything he was saying to them, this is who I am, this is my character. And he was giving them evidence along the way. Remember the evidence that he gave to John the Baptizer, where he said, tell John what you see, the blind see and the deaf hear, etc. He was saying, this is what's written about the Messiah, and these are all the things that I'm doing. So he recognized himself as the Messiah, and he declared it. Because remember that his main mission was what? It was to proclaim the kingdom of Yahweh. It was to proclaim that the kingdom is here and that it was imminent in him. So the book of John is very, very strong in that. And we'll take a look at that in some greater detail. So the 7 I am statement. So we'll also go to John 14, beginning with verse 7, because I think that will also help us to have to frame the discussion a bit as we look at the statements. Okay, so I have to find a better way to do this. I'll stop this and go to the text. Okay, so let's go over to John 14. And we'll begin reading with verse 7. So he's having a discussion with the disciples, right? And he says, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. So he's making a clear connection between himself and his Father. If you knew me, you'd know him, because we're the same, right? It's what I described to you over in Genesis 22, in the account of the binding of Isaac, where it says, Genesis 22:1, now it came about after these things that Elohim tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. And of course, Isaac is a type of, kind of a foreshadowing of the son. So Isaac is Abraham's son, and then he stands in the place metaphorically as Yahshua, right? Yahshua being Yahweh's son. So when he says to him, when Yahweh says to Abraham, take now your son, your only son, as I explained recently, the term is a derivative where it says only son of the term echad. Take your son, yechid echad, the one with whom you are one, the one who's like your bosom son, right? Who's more intimate to you than anything else or than anyone else, the one with whom you are one. And that's the connection that exists between the Father and the Son. So, like it's like people say in our culture, they say about a son and his father, they say about the son, oh, he's a chip off the old block, right? What do they mean? He's a chip off the old block. Well, if you chip the block, it's exactly the same because it comes directly from the block, right? Same color, same texture, right? So he's a chip off the old block. This is essentially what's being said here, that your son, who's a chip off the old block, he's just like you. He's tied to your own soul, that people wouldn't even notice anything different about either one of you because you're both so similar to one another, you see. And that's what we're talking about here. If you would have known me in John 14, you would have known my Father also, because I represent him. And then verse 8, Philip said to him, sorry, I have a wandering text. Philip said to him, Master, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Yahshua said to him, have I been so long with you, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. And of course, people have all sorts of Trinitarian explanations here that have nothing to do with anything, right? But he who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? Right? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does his works. The Father lives in me, right? And I therefore speak as he does. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe because of the works themselves, you see. So they are intimately connected. So whatever you see the Son do is what the Father is. So he is the living, breathing embodiment of his Father, is what he's saying, right? Whatever you see me do, it's as good as if Yahweh himself is doing it, because I'm just like him and he's just like me. We're the same, we're one. I am the Son with whom he is one, right? Okay, so let's go back to the notes. So he exhibits those same characteristics as his Father. Now, I want to take a look at this term before we read the statements. I am he, right? Ego and me. So he uses, and you saw 7 different statements earlier in the Bible Project section, but I'm just going to point out just maybe 3 or 4, maybe 4 of them. So you recall, again, it's part of his character. So when he uses that term, no one else uses that term, because no one else has the right to use that term, that ego and me. Ego and me, I am, and it'll often be translated, I am he, ego and me. He uses it, for example, with the Samaritan woman over in John 4:26. So just for context here, he says, Yahshua said to her, the Samaritan, and remember that the Samaritans were at odds with the Jewish people because there are longstanding hostilities between them, because there are intermarriages and things and different customs and traditions, and they had a lot of animosity between them. So Yahshua said to her, woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshipers. Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. He's trying to explain to her that the pattern for salvation is through us, right? It's through Isaac, it's through Jacob. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who was called Messiah. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. Yahshua said to her, I who speak to you am he, right? So when you look at the terminology here, right, it's the terminology me, right? So he uses the term I am he here. It is I who speak to you, I who speak to you am he. Okay, let me see if if I have the Greek handy here. So if you were, if you were reading this in the Greek, which you could see here in front of me, you'd see here, this is the word for Yahshua. And then he said, and this is it here, ego and me. And then he, says whatever else he says here. So it's one of the instances where he uses that. Another instance where he uses that is 6:20. So let's see here. And that it should come across in just a moment here. So the context here is the disciples in the boat, right? So let's do 16 for context. Now, when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It had already become dark, and Yahshua had not yet come to them. The sea began to be stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. Then when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Yahshua walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. We probably would be too, right? But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." So where he says, "It is I," if you look in the Greek, and I'm not going to keep going back and forth, just trust me on that, it's ego and me, do not be afraid. So they were willing to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. So it was more than him just saying, "Oh, it's just me, relax," No. He says, ego and me. He's using, and he remember, he's speaking to them in Hebrew. Undoubtedly, he's not talking to them in Greek. Okay. So whatever the equivalent in the Hebrew is, he's saying here, right? And I don't know the proper format in Hebrew. Maybe he used the same exact thing that, is in some variety of form that was used with Moses in Exodus 3, right? Which would, I'm missing it up. I'm probably mixing it up, sorry. But the point is that whatever he said, he would have had some variation of that in the Hebrew, speaking with his disciples. So as represented in the translation of the Greek, ego and me, do not be afraid. So he's telling them, he's not just saying to them, "Hey, don't worry, it's me, it's your friend." He's telling them, I'm Yahweh. There's no need for you to be afraid. There's no need for you to be afraid, because I'm the one who has authority and power over even all of this. So it's a very powerful thing that he's doing here. That's more than just, "Hey, it's okay, you're just seeing me." No, there's someone here who has power and authority even over the elements, and there's no need for you to be afraid. And then John 13:19 also. And the context of this is the foot washing, yes? So when he had washed, we'll start reading with 12. So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and master, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, the master and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I do not speak of all of you." And he goes on, "I know the ones I've chosen, but it is that the scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats my bread has lifted his heel against me." Of course, speaking of Judah. "From now on, I am telling you before it comes to pass, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he," ego and me. "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me." And this is the main purpose, of course, of John's gospel, right? Is that they may believe. So if you wanted to sum up the entirety of John's gospel, you might say, the purpose of his gospel, so that they may believe that I am he, that I'm Yahweh, you see. Yes, and Sila put it in the note, that's absolutely accurate. I see the overall theme of the Gospel of John is believe, John 20:31, which I was just going to go to. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Yahshua is the Messiah, the Son of Yahweh, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name. I want you to notice that you might believe because of the power of his name. I mean, let's just go over to that, right? Because it's powerful. It's powerful, and it really sums up the entirety of what you see here in the book of John. This was the main reason why John did this, because but these have been written so that you may believe that Yahshua is the Messiah, the Son of Elohim, and that believing you may have life in his name. So it's stated a little bit differently there, but it's equally true, right? That you may have life in his name, right? Why? Because his name means life. His name conveys life. His name may go at me. I am he. I'm the one who exists. And so you will exist as well. And, I mean, I don't have time. I don't want to give a whole sermon here, but if I take every single one of those verses, he's talking to the Samaritan woman, and he's saying to her that he's telling her ego and me. He's trying to get her to not be afraid and to find living water from him. She's going to the well thinking that she's going to have water from the well, and she doesn't realize that the water from the well is not going to ultimately satisfy her. We're going to see in a few minutes. He says, I am the bread of life. If you want to be filled, you have to get the food that I give, not physical food, right? But a spiritual nourishment that's going to sustain you forever and give you an opportunity for eternal life. It's the same thing with the water. So he's talking to the Samaritan woman, and he's saying to her, in effect, if you continue to just go after the water that you see in front of you, right, you're always going to remain with your thirst. And it's as if to drive that point home. He talks about her husbands, right? He says, well, she says, that one's not my husband. And she says, yeah, you've had 5 husbands. So what's the implication? Is he being a downer on her? Is he trying to, mock her? No. He's driving his point home. He's saying, look, you've had 5 husbands and you haven't been satisfied. It has not quenched your thirst. And the one that you have now isn't your husband either, right? Because you're still trying to quench your thirst through the wrong avenues. I can quench your thirst forever, not with physical water. It has nothing to do with physical water. It's just a representation. But the water that I give, the water of life, is what's going to sustain you. And we can give a whole study, and perhaps I'll do this someday, about water and how in the wilderness, I mean, what you look to the very beginning of Genesis, what do you have? You have the water separated from the dry land. And as long as the water is separated from the dry land, you have you have only water at that thing, but you separate the water from the dry land, and then you see 4 rivers that go through and that start to water the land and start to bring life and all the vegetation that springs up from that, right? It's all interconnected. And you use that theme of water everywhere in the wilderness, right? Why is it a wilderness? Because there has no water. So who brings the water? Well, the one that brings the water is Yahweh. He's the one that sustains. The people grumbled because they didn't have water. And then Moses comes and he brings water his way. It's not his way, it's Yahweh's way. And Moses gets in deep trouble because of that, you see, because he doesn't honor and glorify Yahweh, because the one who brings the water is Yahweh, not men, right? So there's all kinds of ramifications of this, and this is one of them. Ego, and me. I'm the one who brings the water, you see, and I'm the one who ultimately satisfies. Okay, let's go back to the notes here. And you should see it momentarily. So he's in John 13, he's reaffirming to his followers, I'm doing all these things so that you can believe that I am he, right? Then we have an interesting situation here And I promise you, we're going to get, once we get to the declarative statements, we're going to go pretty quickly through them. But this is all background that's necessary to know. Okay. But look at an interesting instance here towards the end in John 18. And John 18 is when, is by the time you're in the Garden of Gethsemane and they come looking for him. When Yahshua had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the ravine of the Kidron, where there was a garden in which he entered with his disciples, and that was the olive on the Mount of Olives. Now Judah also, who was betraying him, knew the place, for Yahshua had often met there with his disciples. Judah then, having received the Roman cohort and the officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. So Yahshua, knowing all the things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Yahshua the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am he," and going me. And Judah also, who was betraying him, was standing with them. So when he said to them, "I am he," and going me, they drew back and fell to the ground. It's always been a strange verse there. But there seems to be an indication that when he said ego and me, that somehow they were thrown aback by it. They literally were shaken by what he said. It's a very strange thing to add to a text. Yeah, it's like some sort of almost like an energy that or maybe just the force of his. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who gives you a jolt, right? But he doesn't seem to have shouted at them, right? He just said, "Go at me." But the sheer power of that statement, as he pronounces essentially Yahweh's name and identifies himself by Yahweh's name, takes them aback, and they literally fall to the ground. These are hardened soldiers. Okay, so don't let that be lost on you. And it's meant to convey something, that there's a powerful presence there. And when you look at that situation, what is happening? They're on the ground with him, and they fall down. What is that? Well, we've seen this before, right? So now let's go back to the beginning of our study, and let's head over back to Exodus 3, right? And we'll start in the beginning. We started in the middle of Exodus 3, but Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, "I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up." When Yahweh saw that he turned aside to look, Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." He said also, "I am the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob." Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. So what is it that we're seeing over in John 18? We're seeing the same thing. We're seeing that now, because of the presence of Yahshua, they're standing on holy ground. And when he comes, in effect, Yahweh says to them, "You're standing on holy ground. Bow," is what's happening there. And they're taken to the ground, whether they want to or not, whether they intend to or not. They're there to take him as if they have some sort of dominion over him, and as if that he's somehow subordinate them. But in reality, they don't necessarily realize it, but it's the other way around. They're subordinate to him. And it's involuntary, but just upon the sheer power of his name, they're also taken to the ground. They're in the presence of the light of Yahweh. What made the scene of the burning bush important was not the ground, right? That's why when people come and they have things about, here, I'm going to take a bit of ground and we're going to package it, and this is holy ground. Please, people, right? Because it's not holy ground. I don't care. I don't care if it happened. I don't care if it happened on the very, and look at John 18. I don't care if you found the literal spot where Yahshua walked. The fact that he's not there now, that ground is just ground, right? But when his presence was there, that's what made the ground holy. When Yahweh's presence was with the bush, and the bush appeared to burn and was not actually burning, That was holy. When the presence was no longer there, it just became a bush, right? So what fascinated Moses was not the fact that, was that the bush was burning. It was that the bush was burning and it wasn't consumed. How could that happen? Well, that's because the presence of Yahweh was there, and Moses was afraid to even look at him. These folks came brazen, like they're going to go and grab this son of Yahweh and just take him. No, they're in the presence of light and power, and there needed to be some manifestation of that, and that's what we're seeing there. Okay, so let's go over back to the notes. So here are the 7, right? So he says, and they're each going to tell us something about his character. I am the bread of life. That's what you see over in John 6:35. So we're going to read through each of these as we get to them. Yahshua said to them, I am the bread of life. And this is the context is he's this is he's preaching, he's talking to the people, and then the disciples are around, right? He gave them bread to eat. This is following very closely on the heels of a feeding, right? So let me just pull back here a little bit here. So if you remember, and hopefully you see this, is this text up? Just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. So in John 6, it starts out with what, right? Where are we going to buy these people bread so that they can eat? And then he feeds the 5,000. So this is the context. It's just not pulled out of thin air, right? You always got to look at the context. So by the time you get down to verse 35, this is, within the context of just having fed all these people. Yahshua said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. This is just a couple of chapters after what? After the incident with the Samaritan woman. So you have an instance where she's looking for water and she's never filled. And here you have people who are looking for teaching, who are starving for teaching and nourishment and are not receiving it because their shepherds are ineffective, right? Their shepherds are supposed to be taking care of them, but instead they're taking advantage of them and they're treating them as if they're low life, right? So Yahshua is turning all this around, and this is why people were drawn to him. Yahshua says to them, I'm the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. So that gnawing emptiness inside that people feel, and that's to the present day, right? Because there's nothing new under the sun. We're all in the human condition. That thing that causes that, inside, that causes people to look for things in all the wrong places, right? Where you get the compulsions and the addictions and the mental health issues and everything else, because people are searching. They know that there's a yearning that needs to be fulfilled, but they're not sure where to fill it, right? They're not sure where to fill it, and it causes all kinds of untold grief. And when they pursue things in the wrong way, it seems to satisfy for a moment. It seems to calm their hunger or their thirst for a moment, but in the end, it always leaves you flat and worse off probably than when you first started, because only Yahweh can fill that longing. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will certainly not cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And he goes on, right? He says, for this is the will of my Father, verse 40, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in him will have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on the last day. That's a promise, isn't it? That's loaded, right? And I myself will raise him up on the last day, because I'm the one who has the power, having been the first one. Is the implication I'm going to have been the first one to have been raised, and I'm going to have the power to raise that person, right? It's quite a promise. Okay, let's go back to so the first aspect of his character that's being described here is the fact that he is the bread of life, that he is the one that satisfies that gnawing hunger that everyone has, and that he is the one, in other words, who gives provision for life He is the great I am. I am is the self-existent one, the one who causes all things to be. That is the meaning of his name. He is the one who brings life. That's why salvation is in the name of Yahweh, because in what other name do you find life? He is the one who gives provision for life. We shall never hunger or thirst because of him. As I said, it follows the feeding of the 5,000. Physical food is good, but there's so much more. It's the spiritual feeding that is of greater value. And I have a note here to compare that to Deuteronomy 8:3. It's the same concept, no? So if you go to Deuteronomy 8:3, what do we see there? What is the manna in the wilderness, right? Begin with verse 1. Deuteronomy 8:1, all the commandments that I am commanding you today, you shall be careful to do, that you may live and multiply, and go in and possess the land which Yahweh swore to give to your forefathers. You shall remember all the way which Yahweh your Elohim has led you in the wilderness these 40 years. And what is the wilderness, by the way? The wilderness is a barren place where there's no food, where there's no water. Yahshua himself was tested in the wilderness. Moses was tested in the wilderness. There is no food and water in the wilderness. So the only sustenance comes from an external source that has nothing to do with anything you can provide. And that source is Yahweh himself. You shall remember all the way which Yahweh Elohim has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And what is keeping the commandments? Let's be, I've always said to you, I want you, everyone who comes within the sound of my voice by the grace of Yahweh, I want you to become mature believers, mature hearers, mature, even if you're not, and I know all of you are, but if this ever comes in the voice of someone who's thinking about the faith, you who are thinking about it, all of you, I want you to think in a way that leads to growth. And I want us to stop thinking of ways like that are very superficial, like whether you keep his commandments or not. Well, it's either keep the commandments, 1, 2, 3, check, 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 and then not, let's not think that way. Let's not look at one another that way. Let's not look at human beings, at people that way. Life doesn't work that way. Life is messy, right? Life is messy. People don't do things perfectly. You don't do things perfectly. I don't do things perfectly. And everything that we do has to be motivated by love for people, right? That's the way. It's like Yahshua said, or was constantly telling his disciples, we're not going to do it that way. That's the way the Gentiles do it. That's the way the Gentile rulers do it. We're going to do it the other way. We're not going to do it by subordinating people, right? We're going to do it by showing people love and by showing them compassion and showing them grace. So when we look at a text like this, that's the way I'd like for us to look at that. He's testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And don't have the immediate thing. Don't let, when you see that, don't let the immediate thought be, well, are we doing check, 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 check? That's not what that is talking about. That is not the flavor that is being conveyed there. What is ultimately, what is keeping his commandments or not? What is it? Ultimately, what does it boil down to? Is it not trust? That's what's being described there. It's not the commandments, check, 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 right? It's trust. Because when you trust someone, you do the things that they ask of you. You do the things that they require of you. I do things for my wife, not because I want to fulfill some checklist of what it means to be a perfect husband. I do things for my wife because I love her and because I trust her and because she loves me and she trusts me. And I know that she does the same for me. An intimate relationship is like that. An intimate relationship is not keeping score. So when people think you, and this is a bit of a sermon, sorry, but it needs to be done, whether you keep his commandments or not, I want us to stop thinking like, well, did you keep the commandments? Do you not keep the commandments? Stop. Look at this on a higher plane, on a higher level, because it's a matter of trust. He humbled you and let you be hungry. Notice that. Verse 3, he humbled you and let you be hungry and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, and they ate it. Why? They didn't know it. Their fathers didn't know it, but they ate it because they trusted him, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh. Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you are to know in your heart, there it is right there, Therefore, you are to know in your heart, internalize it, make it a part of you, that Yahweh your Elohim was disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore, you shall keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahweh your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of what? Oh, that's a surprise, of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing forth in valleys and hills, where he's going to satisfy you forever, your thirst. A land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, satiating your hunger always, right? And it's more than just the physical stuff, right? It's more than that. Is what he told, what Yahshua said, is that the hunger, right, is not just the physical hunger, it's the spiritual nourishment that you need. Of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food without scarcity, in which you will not lack anything. A land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. In other words, there's going to be such abundance that you can have wealth galore. When you have eaten and are satisfied, there it is. When you have eaten and are satisfied, you shall bless Yahweh your Elohim for the good land which he has given you, right? But it's all typified by this concept of bread, of food, right? But it's not bread alone. By the way, is it any coincidence that the Messiah should have been born in a land called Bethlehem? Beit Lechem, what is that? Literally, house of bread, house of food. No coincidences, no coincidence. Yahweh wants us to live a life of abundance, but we have to trust him to provide that to us. Okay, let me continue here, or I'll be here forever. So I am the bread of life. Number 2, I am the light of the world. John 8:12. Then Yahshua again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. And by the way, this is the chapter where, and of course, the Pharisees start in on him. And this is the chapter where he runs across the woman that was caught in adultery. Excuse me. But one thing I don't want you to overlook either is the preceding chapter with John chapter 7, right? Which is a chapter that begins how? And notice that all this kind of is connected, right? John 6, John 7, we just read through. John 7 starts, after these things, Yahshua was walking in Galilee, for he was unwilling to walk in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the feast of the Jews, the Feast of Booths, was near. What's that? The Feast of Tabernacles, right? And then what happens during the Feast of Tabernacles? On the Feast of Tabernacles, they bring out this huge menorah that's lit in the court of the women. and it shines the light, and it reminds the children of Israel, of the light in the wilderness, leaving, not the wilderness, but when they left Egypt, the pillar of cloud and fire that went before them, and they light this menorah. But Yahshua says to them, just like he says in the previous chapter in John 7, on the last day of the feast, he says, about the water, I am the living water, etc. Here he says, I am the light of the world. In other words, all the symbols that were attributed to other sources, he attributes them to himself. You want water? They had a ceremony that they did on the last day of the feast, on the last great day, where they would pour water, and it had a certain significance to it. He says, you want water? I'm that. I'm the water. He says, you want a menorah here? I'm that too. I'm the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life. Why? Because I am the author of life. I'm the one who causes it to be, because I'm Yahweh. You see, this is, Paul. Let me see if I can find this verse quickly here. This is Acts 3:15. Not Paul. Paul may have two, but I have to look that up. But this was probably Peter or John. Let me see. Hold on. Okay. So Acts 3. Peter in his sermon on Pentecost Day. Verse 14. Let's see here. But you disowned the holy and righteous one and asked for a murderer to be granted to you, but put to death the Prince of Life, the one whom Elohim raised from the dead. So if you look down at the notes, the word is archegon. It means beginning, originating, prince, ruler, originator, founder. So they chosen to translate that as Prince of Life. That would not have been my choice. I would have said the author, like some versions have it, the author of life, or the beginner, the founder of life, because that's who he is. He's the founder, he's the author of life. And it's interesting because they put him to death, thinking that it'll keep him down. He's the author of life. How can you keep the author of life down? He's going to be raised, right? He was raised. And then he has authority to raise everyone else. Okay, so let's go back to the notes. So he's that light of the world as well. He's the light that illuminates the entire world. And what does light do? Light brings hope. Light dispels the darkness, right? In a world darkened by sin, he is the light that contrasts with the darkness. To a people walking or stumbling in sin, he's the one who offers hope in the midst of that darkness. So I have a note to compare this to Psalm 84:11. Well, if you go to Psalm 84:11, this is what it says. For Yahweh Elohim is a sun and shield. Yahweh gives grace and glory. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. O Yahweh of hosts, how blessed is the man who trusts in you. He's a sun and a shield. And these kind of verses are things that people would think about when they hear Yahshua say something like he's the light of the world. He's a sun and a shield. He's one who provides light, but he also provides protection, right? He's a sun and a shield. He provides light, protection, and grace. And again, this is John 8, verse 12. The previous verses, the book of John starts, John chapter 8, not the book of John, but John chapter 8 begins with the incident of the woman caught in the act of adultery. And what does she receive from him? Condemnation? No, she receives light, protection, and grace. And then following on the heels of that, he describes himself as the light of the world. 3, I am the door of the sheep. This is a big one, right? I am the door of the sheep. John 10, beginning with verse 7. This one I can do a whole sermon on, so I'm going to resist the temptation. So Yahshua said to them again, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. Boy, that's just so much loaded into that I'm like chomping at the bit to go at it. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. You know, this one and the next one about the shepherd, the next one is I'm the good shepherd. They go together, really. So when you look at this, you see, you have no choice but to consider something like Ezekiel 34. Excuse me. I'm going to read a good chunk of this because it's pertinent. And this was absolutely applicable in Yahshua's day. It's part of the main problem that he had in implementing his ministry. Then the word of Yahweh came to me saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Who are the shepherds of Israel? They're the ones who are supposed to be the leaders, right? And the religious leaders in particular, all the leaders, religious and governmental, but the religious ones in particular. Prophesy and say to those shepherds, thus says Yahweh Elohim, woe, shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? You eat the fat and clothe yourselves with the wool. You slaughter the fat sheep without feeding the flock. Those who are sickly you have not strengthened. The diseased you have not healed. The broken you have not bound up. All the things that the shepherd's supposed to be doing. If they're diseased, if they're sick, you're supposed to heal them. If they're broken, you're supposed to bind up their wounds. If they're scattered, you have to bring them back. And none of these things are being done to the extent that they should have been, right? Nor have you sought for the lost. Instead, people were looking for high position and how important they look in the eyes of everyone. Nor have you sought for the lost, but with force and with severity, you have dominated them. If any of you have ever been in the presence of leadership like that, whether it's secular or religious, you know how abominable it is. I have been on several occasions, and it's abominable. And I resist it with a passion. I have a visceral reaction to it wherever I see it. They were scattered for lack of a shepherd, and they became food for every beast of the field and were scattered. My flock wandered through all the mountains and every high hill. That's a shameful thing for the flocks to wander through all the mountains and every high hill and no one to help them. My flock was scattered over all the surface of the earth. There was no one to search out or seek for them. There's consequence for that. When you have people who are supposedly prepared, people who are in a position and they've been privileged to have education and knowledge and everything else, and all they do is they heap that to themselves as if the purpose was to aggrandize themselves. That's shameful. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. As I live, declares Yahweh Elohim, surely because my flock has become a prey, my flock has even become food. The flock itself has become food for what? For all the enemies, so the beasts of the field, for lack of a shepherd. There's no reason for it because they had shepherds. Where were they? And my shepherds did not search for my flock, but rather the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my flock. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will demand my sheep from them and make them cease from feeding sheep. So the shepherds will not feed themselves anymore, but I will deliver my flock from their mouth so that they will not be food for them. And he goes on a step further. Not only am I going to take them out of the hands of the shepherds, but I'm going to do what they should have done. For thus says Yahweh Elohim, verse 11, behold, I myself will search for my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd cares for his herd in the day when he is among his scattered sheep, so I will care for my sheep and will deliver them from all the places to which they were scattered on a cloudy and gloomy day. Boy, are we in a cloudy and gloomy day. I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land. And I will feed them on the mountains of Israel by the streams. Notice we're always by the water, right? I'll feed them because he's going to feed them. He's going to give them food. On the mountains of Israel, by the streams, and he's going to give them water. And in all the inhabited places of the land, I will feed them in a good pasture, and their grazing ground will be on the mountain heights of Israel. There they will lie down on good grazing ground and feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I will feed my flock and I will lead them to rest. Where you could picture them satisfied, fulfilled, and now they're lying in the sun, resting, right? Declares Yahweh. I will seek the lost, bring back the scattered. Think about the warm feeling. Doesn't it wrap you like a warm blanket? Not a care in the world. Fed, satisfied, resting, protection all around them. I will seek the lost, bring back the scattered, bind up the broken, and strengthen the sick. But the fat and the strong I will destroy. I will feed them with judgment. And on it goes from there. There's more, but that's plenty for now. So it's a very different thing with the good shepherd, right? And the one who is the door. We'll talk about that door in just a moment, but I wanted to give you a full picture of what's going on with the shepherd, right? So what is this business about a door? Well, it's quite literal, actually. In the fields, especially out in that part of the world, the sheep are penned at night in stone enclosures. So what you do if you're out in the middle of a field is you find stones and you create like a boundary so that the sheep don't exit the boundary, and to have a certain amount of protection. And you create like a little wall around them, a little pen around the sheep to keep them safe as possible. But oftentimes there's no physical door. So what the shepherd will do is the shepherd will sit or lie in front of the enclosure so that now the shepherd literally is the door. In other words, if any enemy wants to get into the sheep, can't do it unless you go through the shepherd. So Yahshua, of course, is speaking of this in the context of religious leaders who were unfit shepherds of the nation. They were supposed to protect the people, but instead they would take advantage of them or treat them as less than because of their lack of status or their education or their lowly nature. You see that in the account, for example, of the Pharisee and the and the man who humbles himself, right, and the publican, right, and the one is very humble and lowly, and the other one is all stuck up and arrogant. It's very common image, right? So Yahshua, by contrast, compared to these religious leaders, Yahshua is a devoted, caring, fiercely protective shepherd. The only way to get to the sheep is through him. And in the companion passage in the fourth I am statement, I am the good shepherd, right? Similar situation, John 10. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep, right? So going back to the concept of the door, the one who's trying to come climbing over the walls, right? In other words, you have religious leaders who are trying to do underhanded things and trying to get to, you have this even in our modern day, we have, people who are shifty, who are trying to raise flocks of their own, and they go and they lure people with all kinds of strange teachings or whatever. But he who enters by the door, just do it on the up and up. If you have something to share, do it in organization with everybody else. Don't do it in a way that's underhanded, undermining other people. Come to the door. Because the one who's not coming through the door, what's your reason? What's your reason to do things in a stealthy manner? Come to the door. Be a grown-up and do that. He who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him, the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he puts forth all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers, right? And then and he's talking about the leadership. And then he talks about him being the door of the sheep. And then a little bit further down in verse 11, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And that is the key to understanding what makes the good shepherd good. It's what characterizes the good shepherd is self-sacrifice, is the way that Yahweh wants to change the world through love and compassion, through self-sacrifice, sacrificial love and compassion. He was a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand doesn't really care about the sheep. He's in it for the money. And at the first sign of trouble, he's booking, right? He's not going to stick around and wait to get killed. I'm not getting paid enough for this, right? That's probably what he's saying. You don't pay me enough for this. And he goes, he's not caring about the sheep. He's a hired hand. And the wolf snatches the sheep and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and is not concerned about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. He's declaring what he's going to do for the world. He's laying down his life for the sheep. I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. And they are prophetic things that are being described here. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I laid down my life that I may, and notice that, because I laid down my life so that I may take it again. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down. That's important too. No one's taken it away from me. The Romans, they thought they were, right? They're taking my life away from me. No, you don't get it. I'm laying it down. You're not taking it from me. Because if I wanted to call, legions to come and grab me, legions of angels, I could do that. But it has to be this way now. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. Remember, the instrument that they thought they were doing for his humiliation was the very instrument that became what in effect was his ascension throne. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. So he is the good shepherd. And the good shepherd is characterized by Yahweh's sacrificial love for the people. I have a note to compare it to Psalm 23. We all know Psalm 23 very well, so I won't turn to it. But Psalm 23 describes the shepherd and the condition of the sheep who are resting, and a table is prepared in the presence of their enemies. They're so confident. They're so confident in the shepherd that he's spreading the table right in the presence of the enemies, basically saying, I dare you to try to reach the sheep. We're not going to go hide to have lunch. We're going to prepare it right here out in the open, and I dare you to try to do anything about it. Number 5, I am the resurrection and the life. And this is right in the middle of the scene at Lazarus' tomb, John 11:25. He's talking to Martha, Lazarus' sister. And Martha said to him, well, Yahshua said to her in verse 23, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Yahshua said to her, I am, ego en mi, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said, yes, Master. I have believed that you are the Messiah, the Son of Elohim, even he who comes into the world. And there's so much loaded into that if I get started on that, I will preach a sermon. So I will not go any deeper than I need to on that one. But the bottom line is that death no longer will hold its sting because of Yahshua's conquering of the grave. And that's what you see over in 1 Corinthians 15:55. And you can take that note down. Okay. So I am there. It's all of this is culminating, right? So what are we seeing so far? We're seeing he's the one who sustains us and nourishes us. He's the one who gives us light and guidance. He's the one who gives us protection, the door of the sheep. He's the one who gives himself self-sacrificially and teaches us to be self-sacrificial. And remember, as we look at all these things, we're supposed to be doing the same things to others. We're supposed to be nourishing others wherever we can. We're supposed to be being light in the midst of this dark world and not adding to the darkness. We're supposed to be the ones who are looking after the sheep around us. Even if you're not a leader or a pastor, you are a leader or a pastor of your own, your family, your friends, those who need you around you. Are you looking out for their needs in a self-sacrificial way? Are you acting like a good shepherd? Now, you're not the resurrection of the life, neither am I, but we can at least preach about the resurrection of the life, right? Letting people know that there's a hope ahead that's greater. So some of these will apply to us in a very peripheral way, and others will apply in a much more direct way. But we're looking after the example of the character of our master. And number 6 is kind of a catch-all, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:5. Thomas said to him, Master, we do not know where you are going. How do we know the way? Yahshua said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. There's way too much here for me to unpack, but I will say this, and I want to say it very gently, and I want to say it very carefully. Despite what we often hear, there are not many ways to the Almighty. And I know that that's disturbing for some people in the world to hear, and it's not a slap against them in a, in any sort of way, but it's just a fact. The reason for this, the reason that there are not many ways, and you hear that all the time, oh, there are many ways to God. There are not. The reason for this is not because of the desire for us to be, elitist and exclusivist and cultish, etc. It is because Yahshua as Messiah is, and if you've gone through the series with me of the 6-part, The New Humanity, it was a very detailed explanation about this. It is because Yahshua as the Messiah is the culmination of a long, detailed, and carefully patterned way back to Yahweh after the fall of humanity at Eden. It is the same as the pattern shown to Moses on the mount, where Yahweh says to him, make sure that you do it according to the pattern on the mount that you saw on the mount. And then that's where he gets the design for the tabernacle and for the temple, each of which shows the way to bring that reuniting of heaven and earth in a way that's going to reflect how things should have been back in Eden. Like I said, I described it very carefully in that recent 6-part study on the new humanity. And no matter how much different cultures and societies wish to come up with religious and spiritual means to God, so to speak, there's only one authorized and approved pattern delivered by Yahweh himself through the sacred scriptures that will allow humanity to be reconciled to him. And that is through his hand-selected Messiah, who was worthy to be our representative and the intermediary. Yahshua is the way, the truth, and the life. So when the way in which you give witness to that to the world has to be very gentle, but it has to be something that you hold to firmly, because any other way, if you just deny that, then in effect, what you do is you deny people of a hope, because you want to steer people in that direction. You don't have to do it in a way that's overbearing. You don't have to do it in a way that's heavy-handed, and you don't have to do it in a way that's offensive. And quite frankly, if someone is not receptive to it, you don't have to do it at all, because you just got to live your witness. And if people will ask questions and people are curious, they're going to ask the questions. And Yahweh in his time will give this entire world an opportunity to see. That's not up to you or me to force upon people. It's not upon us to be offensive, and it's not upon us to try to ramrod things down people's throats. No, live organically, live in a way that gives you witness, and people will naturally be curious. And guess what? If no one ever, if people decide not to go in that direction, then they have to, their conscience with Yahweh is going to be what it is, and Yahweh will deal with every person according to their conscience. That's way above my pay grade. That's above your pay grade. So when people go around thinking that, well, I gotta, they gotta do it my way or it's the highway. No, just, no. Live your life, give your witness, and then shut up. And understand that human beings are going to make their own choices, and that as people created in the image of Elohim, they're going to be accountable to Yahweh, and Yahweh will deal with them in his way, because he alone knows their hearts. He alone knows their minds. And that's something well above your pay grade or my pay grade. So give the witness, be firm about it, but be gentle about it, and understand that what's your responsibility and what's Yahweh's responsibility, and the responsibility of the Spirit. Number 7 is similar, it goes along with it. I am the true vine. John 15, 1-5. Yahshua says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. And the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. So neither can you unless you abide in me. We have to be connected to him, in other words. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up. And they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. So notice in all these things, the constant emphasis, even when talking about commandments, about love, right? Joy, etc. There's nothing here about being overbearing. There's nothing here about coming down like a ton of bricks on people or being elitist or any of those things. It just says very firmly, remain connected and do what you got to do. So understanding that Yahshua is divine, and that's something that, we're going to believe that firmly, but we're not going to be offensive about it with other people, right? So I'll just read you straight from my notes. Notice it talks about the true vine, right? The true vine. And something that's true means that everything else is not. It implies that all others are false, even if they look similar. I realize that this is an uncomfortable statement for many in this world. However, I believe it to be so. You can't have something that's a little true. It either is or it isn't. But it's not up to us to judge people saying this one, people do that all the time. They get into this game of, well, this one's going to make it, this one won't make it. That's above our pay grade. Simply put, that is Yahweh's prerogative based on the fact that he alone knows people's hearts and minds, period. But in general, I believe it's important that we resist the idea that there are many ways to the Almighty, and he accepts them all because that's what's in people's hearts. It's a noble sentiment, but in truth, it's not supported by the word of Yahweh. Many Old Testament scriptures, I'm not going to go to these for lack of time. Psalm 80, verse 8, Isaiah 5, 1-7, which is considered the Song of the Vine, and it's a direct representation of what you see here in John 15, Ezekiel 15, and Hosea 10:1. You can write those down. So when we join ourselves to him, we are connected to the source of life-giving knowledge and nourishment. That's why we have to be connected to him. That's why the world needs to be connected to him, all the world, because he's the only life-giving knowledge and nourishment source. And if we're not connected to him, we cannot help but grow and mature in his presence. If we are connected to him, we cannot help but grow and mature in his presence, or conversely, to wither and spiritually perish outside of it. Yahshua wasn't just some human teacher or a prophet who saw himself or was seen by others with delusions of grandeur as the Messiah. He was and is the living, breathing great I am, who is our sustenance, our light, our hope, our protector, our strength, and our Savior. I just want to point out one other thing before we close for today. I don't want to go through this too deeply, but one of the things that some of you may be familiar with, and maybe others are seeing for the first time, is that there are a number of titles that are connected to the name of Yahweh in the Old Testament. There are titles like Yahweh Yireh, Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh Nisi, Yahweh Shalom. There are a bunch of them, okay? And I just listed a bunch of them. I pulled them straight out of a website called Got Questions Ministries, because they had a very nice summary there. But when you look at these titles, and they are titles, sometimes you'll see these and people see these are all the names of God. No, the Almighty has one name, and that name is Yahweh. That is his one only proper name that you see described in all the scriptures, both Old and New Testaments. What you do see are several titles that are descriptive titles that speak to the character of Yahweh. And it was interesting to me, and this is the reason why I printed it and put it out here for you to see it, is that as you look at many of these titles that fall throughout the sacred scriptures, it's interesting the parallels that they make with a number of these I am statements, right? So for example, if you take this one down here, Yahweh Yireh, sometimes people, in the English now, people will say, they'll say Jehovah Jireh or Yahweh Jireh, right? That's they mean Yahweh Yireh, right? It means Yahweh will provide. It's taken out of Genesis 22:14. And I'll just read straight from the notes here. It's the name memorialized by Abraham when Elohim provided the ram to be sacrificed in place of Isaac. So the term Yahweh Yireh it emphasizes provision. So these various titles in their respective verses in those particular sections of scripture represent something about Yahweh's character that's typified by that particular incident or event. So in this incident of Genesis 22, of the binding of Isaac, it's when Yahweh made the provision. Right? Abraham didn't have to go through with what he did. He showed the intent of his heart that he was fully reliant and trusting in Almighty Yahweh, and Yahweh provided exactly what he needed. Trust, provision. That's how it works. Trust, provision. Yahweh Yireh. And Yahweh Yireh describes his character. Yahweh is the one who provides. Right? Well, isn't that the same as, as the one who was the bread of life? Right? It's the same thing. So these are titles. The name of the website that info was found, Pam, is Got Questions. This is and I will copy this link, and I will put it in the chat there for you. And by the way, if you want to see some of the, of course I added a lot of my own stuff, but if you want to see the study from which I borrowed for some of the things of the I am statements, that's the one for that. You're welcome. So let me go back to the notes here, and I'll wrap this up now. Just a couple of other examples. So if you think about this one, Yahweh Rapha, right? Yahweh who heals. You see that in Exodus 15:26. I am Yahweh who heals you. Well, again, this is, I am the true vine. If you're on the vine, you're connected to the vine and you remain healthy and strong. If you are disconnected from the vine, then you wither and you die. And you could also look at the one about the Good Shepherd, right? There are not exact parallels, but there are definitely parallels to these. Yahweh Shalom, Yahweh our peace, right? Yahweh Roi is a big one. Yahweh Roi, it means literally Yahweh who sees. But what is it? It's Yahweh our shepherd, right? And it comes straight out of Psalm 23:1. It's the first line. It means, right? It's Yahweh is my shepherd, Yahweh Roi. Well, what is Yahweh is my shepherd, right? Well, I am the good shepherd. I am the door of the sheep. And you have many more connections as well. Okay. Yahweh is our righteousness, right? So there's this consistency. The point is that there's consistency between the terms that you find describing Yahweh and his character in the Old Testament and the terms that you see describing Yahshua, who is the living embodiment and the witness of Yahweh, the representative of Almighty Yahweh. Okay, there's much more that can be said that can be said, but I hope that this has been helpful, and we'll do more of this as we move forward